welcome, Jason. So I wonder if you would mind just first maybe telling us a little about yourself, maybe with a focus on sort of how you joined the Army and sort of what your experiences or what your jobs have been, your experiences in the Army.
Okay, yeah, I've got a little bit of a unique situation with me. So I attended high school, graduated. Everybody had a plan, and I was like, I got to have a plan. Either I'm going to college or do something. I didn't want to be left behind, right? So I joined the military to have some sort of purpose like everybody else. So my story right off the front is I'm sergeant first class in the United States Army. I'm married. I have 3 children, and my career started in June of 1997. And I went to basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia, home of the infantry. And like I said, I did that because I wanted a sense of purpose. And everybody else had something going on, so I wanted to make sure, I didn't get left behind. So I attended basic training, and after graduating, I did airborne school and received an assignment to Fort Carson, Colorado. And there, I felt out what I really wanted to do, and it was law enforcement. I had 2 goals. It was military or law enforcement. So I completed my contract and decided I was going to do law enforcement. So that's where it becomes unique is I got out and used my GI Bill and attended a law enforcement academy, became a police officer in the state of Missouri I did that for probably almost 5 years. And then looking for career opportunities, I decided to join the military again. And that was during the height of the war and all that. So I left to go do that, and that's where I say a person that joins the military might be somebody that is looking for a sense of purpose or belonging to something bigger, maybe more than themselves. And that's what I kind of felt was going on at the time in the end of 2006 when I came back in. Sure. So I got assigned to 101st, did a deployment or 2 with them, and that's where I ended up becoming a drill sergeant after that.
Okay.
Which brought me back to Fort Benning, Georgia, right? But I was seeing it from a different spectrum. But prior to that, we had to go through Fort Jackson, which is 10 weeks of drill sergeant school, where you have to learn how to be an instructor and how to interact with the trainees. So after completing drill sergeant school at Fort Jackson, we went to Fort Benning's where I got my orders. And I was back on the same grounds that I was doing push-ups at as a 19-year-old trainee. And there I looked at everything a little bit differently. So being a drill sergeant to me is, I seen it from one lens of being a trainee. Now I seen it through the lens of an instructor. And I think some of your notes talked about, what was my purpose? What was basic training? What was AIT? Is that correct?
Sure.
And let me know if I'm getting ahead
of
you.
No, that's okay, yeah.
So being a drill sergeant to me is, I was a senior drill sergeant, so I had to overlook drill sergeants and trainees.
Okay.
And in my eyes, basic training is, for one, we have to look at the Army as a capability. Soldiers are a capability. And they have to be trained to a certain standard to make sure that, we have an efficient capability for the U.S., right? Or we wouldn't be a superpower that we are. So I have to oversee the drill sergeants to make sure that we're training in accordance with the curriculum, but also have to look at the trainees and see if they're absorbing that and what can we do to change that, in correlation with my leadership to make sure that we're hitting those points. So to me, it's, you go through an admin selection when you enlist, which is, admin, any violations, criminal or whatnot. Then we look at medical. And then we come in, but there's still a selection process, and it happens up to this day that I'm in the military, and it challenges one. And you have to instill, which is select, train, qualify, and push them out to the force. And you always hear force multiplier, which is a capability. We want to make sure we have a capability. So you're constantly selecting by, did you do push-ups today to the standard, or did you not? And that's where we have to say the character of people that we need is our capability. We have to get them there, but the ones that don't belong, we have to let them know. We have to be honest with them and say, hey, you didn't meet the standard.
Right.
You're going to either get processed out and you have to reevaluate yourself and come back at it, or it just wasn't meant for you. Right. And so it's a selection. We're training them. We're teaching them land navigation, first aid, marksmanship, and those skill sets they need. So basic training, that's what they're getting. They're getting qualified and pushed out to the force, but it doesn't stop there.
So let me kind of jump in a little bit. So you talked a little bit about sort of one of the primary goals of basic training, which is to make them a capability, to make them to be able to actually undergo whatever task you need them to do when they're deployed.
Right.
Do you see other goals beyond that? So
Yes.
well, maybe we could talk about those.
There's so much to it. I wish I could answer it with a short answer, but you're instilling habits of discipline. So whether they had a family unit that taught them traditions, values, and beliefs, or if they didn't, you're instilling it or confirming it to that trainee. So as they come in, if they had that family unit, you know, mom and dad were saying, hey, we got to get you to school on time. You got to have a lunch. You got to clean your face, and you know, you got food all over that. That's we're doing that as well. But I would say it's more of a hard love. But those that didn't have that family unit, they're learning it. They're learning it. So that's where you see the Army has values like leadership values, you know, loyalty, duty, respect, self-service. That's why they have that, and they teach that because we all come from different walks of life.
Sure.
So we're either teaching it or we're confirming it, and we're building upon that. So one goal of it is instilling values and traditions and beliefs. And the next goal is we're teaching them habits of discipline to be self-aware of what's going on with them. An example would be a button undone on their pocket, right? If we keep driving that and give them a stimulus such as push-ups and all that, then they're going to become more self-aware, and then they're going to be looking at their battle buddy and being more self-aware and be like, hey, you need to fix yourself, because then you look at what they call mass punishment, right?
Hey.
It's because they're not taking care of each other, not being self-aware. And then when we become more self-aware, we have a higher level of intellect, if that makes sense.
Sure, yeah.
Which makes us more surgical in our capabilities.
Right.
And I think, okay, that's the capability side of the house. But also that can translate, but we have to be careful, is into their family household of being, you know, good with managing their personal finances, taking care of themselves physically, taking care of their children, being more of a dad. So we have to, the hard love as an NCO we have to do, but we also have to, at a certain level, after basic training start, like platoon sergeant has to be more nourishing to the trainees. So it's a balance. It's a constant balance. It's very difficult. But there are definitely residual effects to it.
Sure. So you've either been in training or been a trainer for about 20 years.
Going close. It's
So,
either law enforcement or not. It's been a significant
I wonder if you could talk about, have you experienced over that period, you know, when you've been in the military, changes in the nature of recruits that have come in?
Both sides, instructors and trainees, because I think there is a distorted view of what things should be and what they really are. And how things get watered down. And I'll go back to the training. I think they have a certain expectation of when they come in, it's going to be difficult, but they're not going to have such difficulty doing something and getting yelled at, like completely taken out of your comfort zone. Well, those are all there for a reason. But also on the same note, instructors and trainers and all that, they have to operate under constraints given, you know, our movement in life, our changes in life. And I think sometimes that it can water down of what is reality and what they need to train on rather than what is emotionally comforting.
Oh, okay.
And it's a hard balance. It really is. Yeah, so I do see a change in characteristics. I see a certain expectation that wasn't there before.
Okay.
And I don't know. It's a hard balance.
Sure. Well, that kind of leads into, so as I sent to you, one of the readings that the students will do for this week is on how basic combat training in the Army is being redesigned. So I'm just going to read a quote and then maybe get you comment on it. So in the article, they say, the goal of the redesign is to build more discipline after many commanders complain that new soldiers often show up to their first units with a sloppy appearance and undisciplined attitudes. I wonder if you could talk about sort of, in the article talks about that this is a new trend. And I wonder if you could talk a little about whether you sort of see this trend also, why you think this trend maybe is occurring, and if you think this sort of new training can sort of help address it.
I do see that changing, and I hope it does reverse itself a little bit, to a degree. So it is getting sloppier, and you notice uniforms are not as crisp as they used to be. If you scroll through some history, you'll see that uniform changes one. Well, it's just not uniform. It's soldiers taking pride in their uniform, which will translate later in other things, their equipment,
Right.
their ability to accomplish something is more driven. But you do see it getting a little sloppier. But on the same note, which is driving habits of discipline. So we're not focusing on polishing boots now.
Right.
We're not focused on pressing uniforms. But also on the same note, the tempo has changed. And what I mean by that is we're asked to do a significantly amount of more, so certain things are going to have to be, pushed aside.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So you'll see that soldiers are still deploying significantly, but it's training. There's training and there's combat in there. They're doing their duties more, and we've kind of pushed other things to the side, but there's negative effects of that.
Sure.
It's not taking care of your equipment in the field, and it's not taking care of soldiers as well as you do because you have such a high tempo. You're just trying to get the facts and circumstances moving on, and you'll also see that translate into soldiers' personal connections. So if I'm a leader and I've got a task to do, a lot of tasks,
Right.
I'm going to go to that soldier and I'm going to tell him what needs to get done, and he's going to report back, and I just want the circumstances, right? Facts and circumstances. Anything outside of that is useless information, and it's eating up my time, such as, oh, it's your daughter's birthday today. Hey, why don't you take off? And we're losing that disconnect, I would say.
Huh, interesting.
And we're losing disconnect with pride in uniform and all that because the tempo's so high. How do we fix it? I don't know. We have to slow down a little bit and reinstill traditions, values, and beliefs like drill and ceremony, which creates habits of discipline, automatic to response of the command. History, so you know your roots,
Right.
and you believe in something a little bit more, so you're out to do better in what you do to represent that. So it's a big gamut. There's no short answer. Really.
Well, thank you. So shifting gears a little bit, I wonder if you could talk about if there are any sort of general characteristics or personality characteristics of people who tend to enlist. So in other words, are there you talked about a little bit like people are maybe seeking something greater themselves.
Right, yes.
Do you see sort of common backgrounds, other kind of characteristics like you talked about?
It is really hard to say because as a drill instructor, I had this sea of troops out there. So I'd be going through and ask them. Some are college graduates. Some have nothing. They came from nothing. So it's hard to say. So it would have to boil down to is they want to validate a meaningful life, and this is maybe a step towards that direction, or they're looking for a sense of purpose. Well, I think that kind of goes along with it, a sense of purpose and direction, and maybe along the way they'll find out what they were meant to do, or and I think everybody's always looking to justify or leave a legacy in their life. So that could be it. As in a certain characteristic, I cannot say.
Sure, no, that's okay.
It is a broad scope.
Well, you see a lot of them.
Yes.
So one of the readings talks about how sort of training and the experience of the military might influence a personality of a soldier. I wonder if you could talk about, have you observed, say, you've seen a trainee come in, and over the course of combat training, they maybe are a little bit different at the end. And if you could maybe talk about sort of, if you've seen that, what you think happens in training that leads to that sort of change.
That's actually what we try to drive, is a change. They may have it already, and those will be the ones that shine. But we're trying to instill that confidence in them. And then confidence drives everything else. When they're confident, they're going to perform better. So personality traits, if somebody's more meek, we try to drive that out of them by putting them in positions to where they have to drive authority. And it'll work out of them. And do we coach, teach, and mentor along the way when they trip and fall? Absolutely. That's our job to do it. But in the basic training world, it's more of aggressive manner. Get with the program. We only have 14 weeks from my world, and 9 from other areas because I got them through AIT as an infantryman. So you have a short amount of time to change 18 years of their life. So yes, some come in with already that family unit that drove that in them. Some don't, and we have to change that in them to where they're not meek. And I think you made mention in there of agreeableness. And that is, having compassion and kind of going along, but not necessarily is it calling each other out. And you really have to be honest with one another by calling each other out. And that's where we always say in the Army, you have to have thick skin. Nobody wants their feelings hurt, and I get mine hurt all the time. But we're a profession. Professionalism has to be there, and you're just going to have to get past it. So yes, they get more confident in the end. Absolutely. They're more confident in oneself, and they start seeing that they can do more. And then there drives the purpose and direction. But yeah, absolutely, there's a change.
Oh, good, interesting. So you touched about it on the agreeableness part, and so maybe we could pick up that a little bit. And so the reading sort of talks about people who maybe are less agreeable are maybe more likely to join, and then sort of military training, as you talked about, maybe kind of there's reasons for sort of maybe making people less agreeable, not in the sense of agreeable we might think in sort of everyday conversation, but in sort of the sort of personality trait sense. I wonder if you could just comment on that a little bit.
I think, like everything, it has to be there, but there's certain times to where you have empathy and sympathy in that, but there are times to where we don't have time for that. You just need to execute.
Right.
So there's certain levels I think that needs to come into place, and it's generally when you get out to the force is where you should see it at maybe sergeant and above level, because we just need soldiers to execute tasks. Because if they delay, it could be a life.
Sure. Yeah.
And sometimes we don't have time to talk about stuff. It's just I need you to execute, and you have to have faith in me as a leader that I'm making good judgments for your life. Decisions that are affecting globally. And so you have to have faith in that. So there, agreeableness and all that, it has its place. You don't want a bunch of sergeant first classes like me running around all the time, or it'd be kind of tyrannical. So there has to be balance in there always. But it has to happen as just a parent. When you get out to the force, that platoon sergeant, the reason why they call him platoon daddy is because he's the guy that balances all that. And it goes on so and so forth, but there's only so much we can do.
Sure.
At the end of the day, this 500-pound trailer has got to get moved, So action is what we're looking for.
Sure. Okay.
Absolutely.
So one of the readings talks about a bit about sort of the training as a way of sort of being composed of lots of symbols and rituals as a way to sort of kind of introduce you to, in some ways, a organization or group. And so one thing, for example, your haircut, for example, they talk about in the reading, one of the first things they do is they give everyone the same haircut. Right. And so I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about, maybe what you think are some important sort of rituals or symbols or things like that you think are important in training, and then maybe, what you think those things do for maybe building group cohesion. Or the things that you talked about.
I think they definitely have their place, but I think we can do it too much. And in the infantry world, when they go through basic training, AIT, they're eventually going to go what they call honor hill, and it's they've made it, and we have a ceremony of congratulating them becoming infantrymen, and I think that builds cohesion because I had a first sergeant one time that gave a speech there, and he was talking about how the grounds that you're standing on right now are the same grounds that some Medal of Honor recipients stood. So it kind of drives them towards the history and the meaning of why they're there, and drives that sense of purpose and what they stand for. And things like that I think are good, but I think we can get off track when we're doing things of congratulating and bringing them in for every little thing that they're doing, because that's coddling in my eyes, and it's like any kid, they want more and more and more of it. So that's where it goes to hard love again. But giving haircuts and all that and standardizing it across the board is driving that team element, and nobody's an individual. However, let me break that down to when I focus in on somebody. I start individually, get them right. After so much time, then I start focusing on the team. Why are they not getting them right? So then you go from individual corrective action to collective corrective action. And nobody really thinks about it in that depth. But you're not policing up your buddy. So we try to break that individualism right off the bat. But are there things that we do to drive that, such as uniforms? We're part of a uniform service. Dress right, dress on lacing your boots. It drives part of who we are, a uniform service. And are we losing that? Is it getting watered down? I think so, and I think it goes back to your article of instilling that discipline, and through drill and ceremony.
Sure.
A lot of guys, well, we don't march on the fields in line anymore, but drill and ceremony drives habits of discipline about reacting to automatic response on a command. It drives team effort because now you have to look left and right, make sure you're on line, right?
Right.
So those are little things that I think we do need to push. Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Well, that's pretty much all the kind of prepared questions I had. Is there
Okay.
anything that you wanted to add about sort of this topic of sort of the effect of sort of training or the military experience on a soldier? Or maybe from your own experience, and maybe you experienced changes in your life, or if you have any sort of stories you want to talk about of you observed a person, maybe that you caught up with them later or something.
Oh yeah, that happens all the time. People that you least expect is it is a tough life. When people say thank you for your service, the younger generation may not understand that. But as you get older, you realize those long hours that you have, the constant deployments that you have, living out of a bag almost your entire adult life. Those are the sacrifices that I'm glad you may not necessarily know what you're thanking me for, but I do appreciate you taking time out of your day to make eye contact with me and thank me. It really does mean a lot from an older standpoint. And my family, they appreciate it because families, they sacrifice hugely too. And when you go into something like the military, you really need to consider the factors there because you not only have to, as you go through the ranks, you not only have to change how you train soldiers, but how you react to your family at home. So it's a tough life. Is it very rewarding? Absolutely. When you can say somebody that came from nothing or somebody that didn't have a purpose in life, they didn't know what they were doing, and you can give them that direction, you see them excel in life, it is phenomenal. That's when you become rich. You're not necessarily rich as in monetary gains, but people doing great in their life. And the only thing I could say is we have to reinforce when they get trained in basic training, reinforce it when they get to the force. Reinforce that because if they're taught to be disciplined and march and all that, and they get out to the force and they're like, man, the tempo is so high, that doesn't matter. Then we just destroyed everything they thought the military was going to be.
Interesting.
And that's kind of what you see going on now. But who's perfect? It's a huge tempo out there.
Right.
So we do the best we can, and at the end of the day, we want to be honorable in what we do.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jason.
Absolutely.
So,
I
it was a
appreciate it,
pleasure.
Brian.
Thank you.
Absolutely.